I wanted to first of all invite you to this podcast and thank you very much for taking the time out from what's clearly a very busy time for you. Being a founder of a fast growing startup is not easy, as we have realized time and again in our various discussions, different founders.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
thanks
Uh,
for having me for your podcast.
Thank you. So I think at the outset, we wanted to just take a little bit of time to get to know you a little bit, from your early life, where you grew up, and also intrigued with your surname. It's not something that we have come across. Could you help us pronounce that properly, the surname?
Yeah, my surname is Sakalsiz. So yeah, it means that beardless. So the people
I
who
see.
doesn't have beard. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. That's fantastic. And where is this from? I mean, is it because it's not a common surname, is it? Or at least not common to me. I haven't heard that so much.
Yeah, it's not very common. So I think in the first years of the Republic of Turkey, so people, for example, had titles before the surname law. Then most
Okay.
of the people just get their titles as their surname.
Okay. So on that note, can you share a little bit about your upbringing and early life experiences?
Yeah, so actually, I was grown up in a southern coast of Turkey, so
Mhm.
very touristic, very beautiful coast,
Right.
and but actually, my father just moved there from the capital city. Yeah, when I was very small, and I really liked it. So it was because I was watching movies and other things, and at the time, so it is 80s, 1980s.
Right.
So I'm a bit old. So the computers were not very common, and you were only seeing those things in the science fiction movies and other things. And when I just first met with a computer, so actually it was not the I dreamed about. So it was mostly a typewriter. So with a keyboard and your but I was so amazed that I can actually was using a computer, and I decided to become a computer engineer at the time. And also, luckily, my father was in our small city, and he was the first person to using computer in his business. So in this city, so
Oh,
I yeah. So I was also very lucky to meet the computer at his office, and I had also time. And it was the computers were very expensive. So when you
right.
actually a team of people were coming to the office
Yeah.
and they were training all the people and other things. So it was not something like that you can just buy it from a store. So it was a very big event if you just buy computers. And I was also lucky to just see all the trainings and other things. And that's also I and at the time there was no visual user
Mm.
interfaces. So it was
Yes.
mostly comments and other things. And then I actually got into this and I started learning basic GW basic. I was in the primary school. It really caught me. And then, but it was a very small town, so there was
Mm.
no enough materials at the city or the bookstore. So when in the summertime, when we were coming to visit my grandparents in the capital city of Ankara, I was just
Mhm.
going directly to computer stores and I was buying books about computers because there was also no internet at the time.
Right. Yeah. Internet's only around 90,
Yeah. So
late 90s. You said that you're in your mid 30s.
yes. No, I am 43. Thank you for that. Yeah. So then I was learning programming languages, mostly basic Pascal, C and assembly at the time. And I was also on the path of becoming a computer scientist. And also, I was also a very, very good student at the school. My grades were good. So then I had a chance to enter the university computer science department, and so it eventually I became a computer
Right.
scientist.
Right.
Yeah, but it was always a passion for me during my life.
Right. I can see that. And having your dad at such an early stage use computers, and even though you were brought up in a small town, just I was taught my dad is a scientist and he too used these computers. He would go into these. Actually, we didn't have one at home till I think 1995 when Windows 95 got launched. So then I got my first PC. Yeah, I remember my dad used to go and, as a scientist, he had these cards and he would feed the machine and it would then
Mm.
churn and it'd make lots of noises, and then you would get the answer. And the machine was as big as a room, and so on. So I'm curious, how is it like growing up in Turkey? I mean, Turkey is an amazing place in the sense that you are in the middle of Asia and Europe, right? And
Yes.
so you have in some ways, the best of both worlds. You can say the worst of both worlds, but it's amazing that, so just as a little child, how was that like? I mean, having these different influences and growing up there, and how that shaped you today as a global citizen.
Yeah, so my hometown was a very touristic place.
Hmm.
And at the time in 90s when I was small, so most of the European people just coming for vacation on the summer. And it actually the number of locals was a minority
Right.
in the hotels and other when I was in the mid school, middle
Mhm.
school. And it also, yeah, improved my language. So I learned English in school, but I actually I was able to practice. I also learned German
Right. Oh,
from the people coming to my town. So it was a very cosmopolitan city
right.
coming from all over the world. I was talking to
Right.
them because I was working in places and other things. And it's also helped me about understand how the software industry is in different countries. Because
Right.
when I was just building my first company, there was no broadband internet in Turkey. So we
Right.
had only dial up to the internet. But I learned that there's a SaaS business in Sweden
Right.
at the time. So because when we were talking to people about, so some of them were interested in computer, and you find someone and you start talking about technology and other things, and they were talking about, oh, okay, we in Sweden we don't buy software, we just lease
Mm.
that. So they were not calling
Oh,
as software as a service at the time, so
right.
they just calling it that leasing software instead of buying software. I told them, oh, it's a nice idea. I think we should do that here as well because people cannot afford buying software in Turkey. It was not a very rich country, and the software was very expensive. Leasing would be an option,
Right.
using crack software and other things. And after I graduated from the school, I worked in a very big software company. So I think it was the biggest software company in Turkey. They were developing software for also defense industry and the government projects.
Right.
And I saw the SAP over there,
Right.
and I really liked its technology. And so it was very different than what we were
Mm.
using as a business software in smaller companies. And I thought that actually this is something that I should do for smaller business. So
Right.
I can just take SAP, make a smaller
Mm.
version of it, and serve it from the internet as a software as a service. And I can serve it to small businesses. So they don't need to
Mm.
buy that big software, but they can still have the opportunity to use such a good technology and
Mm.
software, because the companies who have multiple offices in different locations, they
Mm.
don't have solution. So, and because I heard that the broadband internet is coming,
Right.
the Turk Telecom was making some pilots in some cities, and okay, it's coming now. We need to be ready for
Mm.
leasing software from we can serve it from the internet, and they can use it from their computers without installing any servers and other things. So that was my first company. So I also convinced a colleague from the company that I worked, and also another classmate from the school, and also an old friend from the town who's a very good sales guy. So we founded the company.
Mm.
And yeah, it was very hard because there was no good funding options at the time. Actually, the only way to bootstrap, you need to finance yourself.
Right. Correct.
So yeah, we were developing the software. We were also developing some web pages and other things to make money and to finance the development of the product. But we then started selling, and after 3 or 5 years it took off. And now after the 8th year we had more than 2000 customers, and we were getting traction because cloud was becoming the major for everybody. Yeah, that's how it started, my startup journey. Now I'm building my fourth startup.
So you are a serial startup entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's how my startup journey started.
Right. Right. So and now you're a global citizen. I mean, you're shuttling between different countries all the time. Last time we spoke, I think you were in the US, and now you're back in Turkey, right? Giving us,
Yes. Yeah, actually I moved to US, but I still have team in Turkey. So most of
right.
the technical team is in Turkey, and we have an office here. So yeah.
That's why you need to keep shuttling between these two places.
Yeah.
And why did you feel the need to move to the US? What's the startup scene like in Turkey? Is it still like if you really need to get funding and successful, you need to go to Silicon Valley, or things are improving in Europe? I mean, when I was in France in 2004, just to give a little context, I remember two of the biggest VC partners came to give us a lecture in the college I was in. Everyone in the class was saying, okay, you guys control all this big money, but why aren't you in Europe? Why aren't you in France? We would like to start something here. And the guy said the laws in Europe are not favorable to startups. The bankruptcy laws, for example, he said there are many laws, but bankruptcy laws, he gave one example. In the US, if you're bankrupt, it's almost like a badge of honor. You become bankrupt, you dust it off, you start another one, and you will still get funding. You get bankrupt in Europe, that's almost the end of your career here. And the country will blame you, everyone will blame you. It's looked down upon. And that's just one example. He said there are many other facets which make the US so much more attractive. I know things have improved a lot. Berlin and other places London has also become somewhat of a startup scene. But what do you find? Yeah, I mean, you moved to the US, so clearly you're thinking that it's probably better for startups. Would love to know your opinion.
Yeah, so I already built companies for Turkish ecosystem and Turkish market. So I just wanted to make something bigger and more global. And the fundraising was not the reason that I moved to US. The customers are over there for me. The product is intentionally built for the US market, for their problems and to solve their problems. And so that's also I want to move to US to become closer to the customers and make more sales. So it's very hard if you are doing sales outside of the United States. Yeah, you can have inbound. It may work for some, but if sales is also part of your startup journey, then yeah, you need to be close to your customers. I moved to US. So if you're in the seed stage or early stage, it's always easier to raise money in your own country because they know you and they understand you better. So in earlier stages, the investors usually look at your personal connections and your personal story. The product is not very important. So they look at you because you always pivot. So you always change your idea on the journey. So they mostly look at what you are doing and what's your insight and personal connection with the product and the journey. So yeah, Turkey has now a good early stage investor ecosystem, but still doesn't have the enough resources to finance later stages. And so it's better to go to US if you are later stages, but in early stages it's easier because, for example, you graduated from best university of your country, the investors in your country just know it. But if you go to US, you're an alien coming from us.
Correct.
They
Right.
don't just yeah. So still that's how we raise money from here in Turkey. But yeah, then move to US to increase the traction.
Understood. Yeah, no, makes sense. I found the same thing when I first went to the US. I mean, no one knew. Now people know a little bit about IIT, and okay, IIT is one of the best colleges in India. But at that time, only the professors knew, okay, you're from IIT. But if you went outside and told anybody I'm from IIT, doesn't count. Whatever
Yeah.
is your US university, and that may
Yeah.
not be as good. It doesn't matter, but that is better than what you've done in India. Same thing in Europe as well. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I guess people are just familiar with it's nothing to do with anything else. If I go to Turkey, same thing. People will not be so much familiar with what's in India. If I did something from Turkey, they will value that, and vice versa in India, right? So that's fascinating to hear about that. Before we go on to your current startup, and we are very keen to know about that journey, and I can see Gautam is very eager. I have one last question. I wanted to know if you talked about your father and he being a pioneer in using computers in accounting, but did you have any role models or mentors who played a significant role in shaping your aspirations, your your viewpoints, and guiding you?
Yeah, so still when I was kid, so one of my father's friends, so he just also graduated from the same university and that I graduated, but I think it was just before the high school. So he graduated from the university and he then joined the Microsoft. And Microsoft
Right.
was a very glorious company. By the way, today they are still glorious. So, but yeah, it was about the early days of Windows 95. And so it was like a dream to join a Microsoft as a computer scientist or software engineer. And I thought that, okay, I think I need to go to this university because there is a
Right.
path like this. So and yeah, it really paid off. So I
Mhm.
just got in the university, and I think I really learned the fundamentals of computer science and the theoretical way of doing it as well, and which is, I think, very crucial if you
Mhm.
want to develop something deeper in technology. So it just motivated me. And also when I was just building the first company, and even we were not calling it a startup. We didn't know that word. So we were talking about, okay, we built our own business,
Right.
even though it's a product and startup. We were not talking about, we were not calling it as a,
Startup.
but we were just following some technical web pages such as, and it was very famous at the time. And also there was a Turkish clone of that style in Turkey. We were also following that one. And I started the essays of Paul Graham.
Right.
And so we started reading them, and it was very influential. And because I was also building a company, and I was also reading the stories of Paul Graham and his insights about building and growing a company and how it is like in the US. And so it started to create more relations to my story. Okay, I think we are doing something different. We are on a bigger mission. And so, and people are doing this, and they are creating time global stories, which also impresses other people.
Right.
Okay, so I need to do that. So it was then Paul Graham started Y Combinator after some time. And also it was a dream for me that, okay, I need to join this with other companies. I need to meet those people. I need to understand their journey and learn from them. And luckily, in my third startup, I went through YC. I became a Y Combinator alumni, and it's a very, really great community. I really learned from them as well.
That's great. Right.
Yeah.
So, do you have some? I mean, yeah, Y Combinator is amazing, and what they have done for the startup world is great. I was just wondering if there is something now similar coming up in Turkey, the similar accelerators that you're seeing in the young
So
people starting.
yeah, there are now accelerators all over the world, also in Turkey
Yeah.
as well. But YC is a little bit different. So I also joined other accelerators. So and it's very different. So in the YC, we were just always about traction and how
Right.
to get traction and how to get a faster pace. It was all about that, and you talk to other people, and the biggest influence in the community is that you were learning from other founders. There was a very great founders around yourself, and instead of learning from partners, because what they're saying and what they're actually telling is already on YouTube. So they also, yeah, you can ask specific questions and you can get your specific answers because they have very big experience and knowledge. But most of the thing that they were talking in the batch is already YouTube. So you can watch those things, you can learn those things.
Correct.
But what you learn from other founders, from experience, is actually unmatched in other accelerators.
Right.
So I think that's the real power of YC though. So also you get a badge as a YC founder, and it also makes easier for you to fundraise. So you also have a social proof now in the US startup ecosystem. So it doesn't guarantee that you make a fundraise, but it's for sure that it's easier, right? And so the other accelerators, unlike YC, they were mostly about how to fundraise instead of focusing on the traction and the growth. Because YC just makes you believe that if you just have a good traction, fundraising is not a problem. You will get it. But in other accelerators, they always train and make you prepare for one fundraising. So how to make a better pitch, how to tell your story and other things. But if you go to customers and if you make your mind clear, if you know how to sell, and then creating a pitch deck is not a problem. You already figured out. So in the YC, I think they only make a one presentation, how to make a presentation. We were mostly talking about
How to traction and how to grow fast. Yeah,
yes.
I see. Fascinating. Well, that's interesting. So Gautam, I can see Gautam wants to get in.
Sure. I'm also following Y Combinator for a very long, and I see there are many startups, successful startups they have given, and it's a very good platform for a young startups to join the Y Combinator batch. But I think the process is very deep. Can you explain a bit more about the process for Y Combinator?
And any
So
advice you might have having gotten.
So yeah, if you are graduating from an Ivy League university from YC, and if you are young, and if you are technical, and it's really much easier, I can say. But if you're coming from out of US, but if you are doing something specific to your country, and then you have a chance to enter the YC as well. Such as, for example, I see many building fintech companies that already existed and succeeded in US. They were just doing the same things in the Southern America, and yeah, they were just getting into YC, and they were also very successful. And also, I see many Indian companies in the YC batch as well. So mostly in developer space, and also, for example, in the logistics space as well. So or retail space such as Instacart for India or some,
Hmm.
because India has a very different ecosystem in retail and other things. So if you are
True.
doing something specific to, so that business model will not work in the US. So such as if you are doing something groceries, it wouldn't be a very good opportunity in the US. So it's different. But if you are doing something specific to your country, and if it's a very big market, a big country, and also it will be a regional thing as well, then you also have a chance to enter the YC. Or I see, for example, many African companies doing crypto or Web3. So then you have more chance. But if you have traction, they usually look at the momentum. So instead, other than the total revenue number, they usually look at the momentum you have, how fast you are in how fast, how what you achieved in a small time. So if you can tell those things in your applications, then you still have a chance to enter the YC as well.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. Let's talk about the new start. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. It's a Peaka, right?
Yeah, Pika, we call it.
Peaka. So when I was at Zytex, I visited multiple stages. Job stage got my attention. You guys were doing something different, and I was searching on the Google what is the meaning of Peaka, but I was not able to find the exact meaning. It get related to the something English word peak at the height. So is that correct?
Yeah, the Pika as a whole doesn't have a name, doesn't have a meaning. I think some may have a meaning in Russian, but it's not related about the company. So yeah, actually we combined the peak, which means the top, and also A, which means we best. So A class or something like that. So peak A. So it's top and the best. And also we are now in the data space. So and data sticks are usually like a pyramid. So
Yes.
and it also an analogy to its structure. So that's how we just actually adapting this name.
Okay. So what inspired to work on the space of data? So is there any particular point that triggered you that I should work on database startups? Because your startup, your product is totally different. I understand. Actually, I as a developer, I worked as a backend developer in my.
And the company was named as Code 2, so the next generation of coding. But yeah, we had some traction. The conversions were not very good, so we were not investing enough time to build a product on the platform. And if they don't have any technical background, it was very hard to build the application on the platform. I think it's for all the no-code or low-code platforms in this space. So we look at the data. Okay, which are the best customers that we have becoming successful and why they are not churning. So when we look at the data, we realize that the companies who integrated data actually was not churning. They keep using the system and they were happy. We didn't have a very good integration layer at the time. So we had some options mostly on API based systems. And also we can charge more and we can get more of them, and we will have less churn and more retention. When we were just improving our data integration layer, we also realized that okay, this is not the problem of the no-code space, but it's the problem of everyone. And we just came to a solution from a different perspective. The data warehouse in the ETL is a very costly and expensive and time-consuming operation. So if you have multiple systems, like the multiple people, and they have their own data, like the people's unique knowledge. So what you are actually doing is you clone the people and ask questions to the
Yes.
people to get the knowledge, and then you digest and create an answer from it. But now the technology enables more things like this. So now we have Zoom meetings, and I don't need a very big meeting room. So what we are doing is in Peaka, so we have this data virtualization thing. So we can read and extract information from the origin source, but we also have a federated query on top of it. So you can aggregate those information like that. So we also have this partial cache option. So if you are just accessing some portion of data very frequently, you can also cache it in Peaka. So it's a combination and optimized version of a data platform, which is a
Yes.
very cost effective and easier to build, but you still get the same information. So at the end, you write a query and you get an answer in data warehouse. You can also do it in the Peaka as well. So you run the query, you get the answer. So, but it's very made and easy. I
So,
don't know if the analogy makes made sense for you.
it kind of did.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell the technology to people. Yeah, but I think this is the most close.
Is a backend developer personally connect with the product you have built? When I was coding, I faced multiple problems like connecting two databases. So there was a one product in which I was working. So one product was for dealing with MongoDB and one product was working with the MySQL. So my job was to connect both the database. At that time, I didn't be able to pick up. If I had knew, then I would definitely go through that.
Yeah, so I also see this problem in every company. So because nowadays companies using many SaaS tools, and also if they are developing tools inside, they also have many databases as well. So your data is scattered out across those platforms, and there is no easy way to aggregate that data and use that information. So in Pika, we are just solving this problem, yeah, in a minute.
Yes, I agree.
I'm curious to know how is it different from these iPaaS solutions. In some sense, they also are integrating legacy systems with different and helping different software as a SaaS or softwares connect to each other. And I'm guessing they're
Yeah.
competitors of yours in some sense.
Yeah, so in the system, so you have two types of things you can do. So you have some information in the system, such as CRM, you have some data in it, and also
Correct.
you have some actions in it. So you can act on a CRM, so you can create a deal, you can send an email. So those are the actions you have, but you also have data in it. So the iPaaS solutions just focus on the actions. So instead of aggregating data and getting an information or extracting an information out of that distributed data, they just orchestrate the actions in those SaaS systems. So, but unlike iPaaS in Pika, we concentrate on the data and information you have in different systems. So, and we just use the tools to extract that information and get the insights from your data, unlike the actions. So you can move data, but then you have the duplicate of your data in different platforms. So it doesn't just give you a single source of truth of your data, but you have some portion of data just moving around different platforms.
Correct. So it's not as efficient.
I think there's some internet. Also, 2 days I was so naive. My colleague gave me the link of one of your podcasts. The host was Abdullah, and in that you were discussing more about the no code, I guess. Can you give some more highlights of that particular podcast episode?
Yeah, so yeah, when we were developing the Pika at the first time of Pika, so we were still just trying to build a no-code platform. But yeah, we just wanted to create this data layer instead of a no-code platform because it's a bigger problem, bigger market, and there is no good solution on the market. So everybody is trying to make it easier for ETLs and other things. But what we are trying to do is just to eliminate the ETL. And now we are going to also called Peaka as a zero ETL data platform in the upcoming days.
We as a
Right.
software company are also working on local platforms like Decisions, and we are now exploring X. That is, previously it was a different company, but now it's acquired by the HCL. And I think the space of no code will grow in near future time, but it may be taken over by AI. That's what me and DC were discussing today.
Mhm.
DC did some research on that, and DC can put more light on that.
So yeah, no code platforms is under threat, AI general intelligence. So and if that happens, investors believe that no code platforms will die. I'm not sure. We will see. It will be an opportunity for those platforms because generating code of a very big system is not the thing that everybody wants. They want to create because you don't create things at once in software industry. You create and iterate. So iterate over code is not always the best solution. So usually you have a base, then you iterate over that base. And most of the no code platforms work on metadata. And so it's always easier to iterate on metadata if you have a good base or good
Right.
textures. So iterating over that base is much easier on local platforms. And so it will also help those platforms to get better traction and also enable more people in this space. So yeah, we will see. Yeah. And we will also see that a few of them will fail, but we will also see that a few of them become very successful. Yeah.
Okay. So would you like to ask add anything?
Yeah, sure. I mean, now that you're a veteran in startups, and one of the key things we hear from a lot of founders is the talent is one of the key to the success of the company. So I wanted to know what's your thought process of leadership? How do you lead a team? Is your team, your team's also somewhat virtual? I mean, you have a development center in Turkey, you are based in the US, so you're not with them all the time. And so what's your viewpoint on leading your people and the talent in the people in the company, and how do you manage that and retain talent? Right.
So yeah, because the tech people think different, they act very different, and also the output of tech people also differ a lot according to their technical level. So if you have very good people, you can just get 20x more output from people than in other people in the space. So tech space is very different if we are talking about the output. So I have a playbook. So I always start with a few people and also learn things from those people as well. But the real thing is that the ability to
Right.
make a decision together. So are we helping
Mm.
each other, or are we just so are we sorry, maybe I can just say are we collaborating by helping each other,
Right.
or are we collaborating by sharing the stuffs? And
Right.
I always choose the former one. Or how do we collaborate by helping each other? So
Right.
making decisions together and raising the things easily. Can I talk to people easily, and they can we have a common space to talk those things, or are these people just think that they are being insulted by being
Mm.
criticized?
Mm.
So this initial team shouldn't think that session is a bad thing. So they can talk and they can help each other to grow. So if you can create such a culture, and it's always easier if doing those kind of things in a smaller team, and if you also find these people with high technical skills, then you have a very good growth pace developing the product. So I think helping each other is the best part of the company,
Yes.
and also getting feedback is also very important.
Right, sure. The other thing that you mentioned, I think, when we were talking earlier, was about sales. I mean, you moved to the US to be closer to your customers. You talked about Y Combinator and the constant push for traction. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of sales in the early life of a startup? Did you are a technical person? Did you have as one of your early team a professional salespeople in, or do you think that is important? So generally about sales and
Yeah,
the importance of sales.
yeah, sales is always hard for me. I'm not a sales guy. So, or not started as a sales guy. So, a technical guide, and yeah, technical guides are also introverted people as well. So you need to change yourself. You need to talk more about your company and your solution and the problems people are having. And you also need to learn how to ask the right questions to the people. So what I did was I read many books,
Right.
and also I tried to keep push myself. So it was not easy, but yeah, you need to do those kind of things. And I don't recommend hiring salespeople at first, because most of the time, okay, you have an idea, you have an hypothesis, but you are not sure that your product is ready for the market. So, and salespeople are usually good to execute a sales playbook if they know and understand the customer's problems and answer the questions. If you have such a knowledge space, yeah, then you can hire salespeople if it is a repeatable playbook. But in the early stages, actually you learn from customers. So you actually talk to them and you understand that your product is not solving their problems. And then you get that feedback and you craft your product and iterate over it. And at some point, say it's becoming easier. Then it's time to hire a salesperson now. But at first, you need to get that feedback by yourself. You need to, then you are the person who need to convince everyone.
Right.
Yeah. So let's also call it, founder-led sales. And there are also some good books. So you can just start reading those books. But yeah, you need to do a few sales by yourself, because you will just make this thing ready for the next stage.
Yes. When we talk about sales, we see always promote the power of storytelling. Even our CEO visits is a power of storytelling. And next week I'm attending one sales conference happening. There's one particular workshop session on that topic, the power of storytelling. So do you have any insights on that topic?
Yes, stories are very powerful. So instead of telling the product or the solution, so people usually want to work. People, they like to also have actually spend time. So the initial contact is always building a relationship.
Yes.
And people build relationships if you have something in common. So if they can relate to your story and their selves, and if they can find some other relations, if they like your story interesting, so it's always easier to create a relationship. And if you have a good relationship, they want to work you. And so yeah, the product is coming next. If you want to keep these people using your product and doesn't want them to churn, yeah, then you need to have a good product. But selling is not about a good product. So yeah, it may be in the second meeting.
I'm just curious, you mentioned the small team, and recently we had all this small team coming into focus because of Twitter and Elon Musk's acquisition, and he making his team small, and he's talking about this small team philosophy. Right. But also there was a lot of, on the other side, a lot of people were talking about how it was somewhat unfair in the sense that he being the founder and everyone else working, and there's a lot of chatter around that it's not fair to expect so many hours. And he talked about hard Twitter, if I remember right, and that we are going to go really hard, we're going to be small, but we're going to work hard. So how in your own personal life, what do you think about balance, and for the company as well, work-life balance? Well, vis-a-vis startups are hard, so you really need to push the boundary sometimes. You need to get it into a proper form before you have an important investor meeting which can decide the future of your company. You balance these different pulls and keep your employees also motivated in the process.
Yeah, so from my personal perspective, I don't push employees. So, and I also don't believe in those kind of things. Yeah, you can get some output if you push employees, but instead of pushing them, making them believe in the future you are expecting is much more influential. And also, I don't believe that if you just work very hard the all day, all time, it's not the best output you would get. So you can work overtime a few days, but not more than 2 days. Then you will going to actually spend from the other days, regular time.
That's true.
Yeah, you can just make 2x by working harder or more.
Right.
So if you want to make 20x, so yeah, you need to think about, can we make a better approach? Can we do it in an efficient way? Can we enable another process? So if you can find those things in your work, then the output will be much, much higher. Then you always need a buffer to think about those things. So if you just work overtime, then you don't have that buffer. So you are making 2x, but you're not making 20x.
You're right. So curious, how do you being in a startup world?
Yeah, so there are always challenging times in startups, so it's always like a roller coaster. Yeah, so as I said, I always talk to my teammates, and I also very transparent to my investors, because they also see those challenges in every startup, and they may have a playbook for that, or they may have know a people who can just coach me and help me. So I don't hesitate to get help from people, and I think I'm a very good listener on this part, and I am always open and transparent to the team and investors. So it's that much easier to get opinions from other people and find a way together. That's usually how I.
Can I just push back a little bit? I see where you're coming, and transparency is important. But on the flip side of it, and I've heard people say, and is, let's say you're facing imminent, not bankruptcy, but really very close to that, very strong challenge. If you don't hit certain targets, you might not get your next level of funding or something like that. So existential crisis. And
No, I can hear now, but I lost you.
okay. So I just wanted to push back on your last point a little bit. I wanted to say that suppose you had a very challenging time in the company. Company is more or less like, I don't want to go back every time to Elon Musk. I'm not advocating his way of doing things, but he talks about, 2008, his company was about to shut down. Right. And it's a matter of weeks. In such a situation, we face these from time to time. Startups face it a lot, and then suddenly you get an investment and boom, you're again exploding and growing. But there is a lot of uncertainty leading up to getting that investment or getting that big sale that you need. And if you don't, you might have to shut down. Startups shut down all the time. So the challenge is, if you're very transparent, let's say at these very critical stages, your key employees might start jumping ship, for example, or might get scared themselves. They might let fear overcome, and they might not be able to work properly. So, as a leader, how do you think being over transparent in those circumstances might be a challenge?
Yeah, I still believe that transparency is also the key in that time. Yeah, you may keep those people until to the end of the bankruptcy. Then you will lose all the friendship of those people. Then you will not have a chance to create another startup. So yeah, so I think it's a worse situation. So, and maybe you will just lose a chance to actually survive. Maybe they will just suggest another thing that you haven't thought of. And also they may bring some other people as a stakeholder to this decision making. And also, yeah, bankruptcy is not the end of your life. Yeah, so sometimes companies go bankrupt, but they just spin out another product. Or the segment. So there are many such stories, those things as well. And if they're key stakeholders in your company, yes, still I believe that being open and transparency is, because if it is inevitable, why don't you betting on losing your trust?
Right, of course.
So I think trust is the most crucial asset you will have in your business life than money and other things. So if you have trust, and then you will find money later.
Right. Interesting. No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Gautam, do you have any closing remarks, any closing questions, and then we can wrap it up for today?
You mentioned that good habit of reading a book. So can you suggest a good book for our listeners?
So every startup founder should first read the Lean Startup, because most of the terminology comes from that. So if you are going into sales as a technical founder, then founding sales from Peaka is also very good. And if you are in building a marketplace, or then I think called Start Problem from Andrew Chen is a great book. So it is both a strategical and tactical book, sorry. Yeah. So, and also if you want to talk about culture. So it's not very popular, but I was really impressed by the book named Ambas. And Ambas, yes. And also Simon Sinek's Start with Why is also
Right.
very crucial building a culture. And yeah, there are many, but those are the, I think, a few of them I can suggest.
Yeah, that would definitely go into my bucket list. Yeah, after I started
Yeah,
working with this team, I have also started reading books. Before that, I was not too much fond of reading books.
Yeah. So you always need to book because as your company grows and make transitions, you also need that transition. Your abilities will transform as well. And yeah, books are great sources for that.
that's right. Yeah. So, Mustafa, thank you so much again for taking all the time today. We had a fascinating discussion, learned so much from you as we went through the conversation. And I wish you and Peaka the very, very best.
Thank you. And also thanks for creating this opportunity for sharing my story.
Thanks.